All right, everyone, welcome to our webinar this morning. This is 2020 Forensic Predictions and What Happened in 2019. My name is Andrew Garrett and I work in marketing here at SecurityMetrics. And I'm pleased to announce our speakers today, David Ellis and Aaron Willis. You can see their pictures here on your screen. Dave is our VP of Investigations here at SecurityMetrics, and he holds the credentials of GCIH, CISSP, QSA, and PFI. We also have Aaron Willis joining us today. He's our Senior Forensic Analyst, and he also is adjunct faculty at Utah Valley University. He has a Master's in Digital Forensics, and then also the credentials of CISSP, QSA, and PFI. So as you can see, we have two very qualified, experienced individuals here with us today, and we're looking forward to hearing what they have to say. Just a reminder, a question that we get asked quite often is if we will be sending out a recording of the presentation. And the answer is yes. So please check your emails in the next couple of days. We will make sure that a copy of the recording gets sent to your email that you used to register today. So let's go over our agenda before I pass the mic over to Dave and Aaron. First of all, today we're going to be talking about the 2019 what we learned from data breaches and what we found in some of the forensic investigations. We'll also be going over tips to avoid a data breach going forward this year in 2020. And then to wrap things up, we'll also have some forensic predictions from Dave and Aaron. So stay tuned for those. As a reminder, we will be having a Q&A at the end of the webinar for about the last 10 minutes here today. So if you do have questions, feel free to chat those in using your GoToWebinar control panel. And then at the end of the webinar, we will answer as many of those questions as we can. If we don't have time to answer your question, we will reach out to you on an individual basis to make sure you get that question answered. Well, again, we're happy to have you all here with us today. It looks like we have a good crowd here with us. So at this time, I'll go ahead and pass things off to Dave and Aaron.
Good morning. This is Dave.
This is Aaron.
And we're happy to have you with us today. And for the folks on our friends on the East Coast, good afternoon. Little disclaimer before we start. Wanted to let you know that the things that we're going to discuss predominantly come from experiences that we had during this past year, 2019. The investigations that we conducted. So the statistics, findings, things like that should all bear from 2019. Some of the anecdotes, examples, other stories that we might get into may traverse a little bit into, more past years, but the majority of what we're going to discuss is going to be extremely current. So before we get, deep into that data, we wanted to start with something a little bit on the more light side, and you're going to want to pay attention to this because there's some spiffs available for this. We're going to start with a couple of trivia questions for you, and we want you to chat in the answer as quickly as you can. And on this first one, let's see, we have an OGO backpack. I think we've got an OGO windbreaker, a few other things along those lines. So over the course of our presentation today, you can have an opportunity to win one of three prizes. So the first one who chats in the answer on this next question gets an OGO windbreaker. Let's go with, all right?
There's not going to be enough time to Google it.
Yeah, with any luck. Yeah, we're not going to give you a lot of time. So who said the only truly secure computer is one buried in concrete with the power turned off and the network cable cut?
We have a winner, John Aricazo.
John Aricazo?
Oh,
Okay.
wow, that was fast.
All right, John Aricazo knew that it was Bill Gates in 1981. Now, you could consider this a method of preservation of evidence, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I look at that and I think, wait, a computer buried in some concrete? Give me a jackhammer or a sledgehammer and a little bit of time and I can get to that evidence.
That's right. And depending on how valuable the evidence is or how badly you need it, to what extent that would dictate to what extent you would go to be able to recover it. I actually have some hard drive platters sitting on a shelf that are twisted, mangled, have scratches, and we're pretty sure that we could actually go in, if we had enough money and time, and recover some find some recoverable data on them. So with that, let's get into our next one. So this one is going to be for, what do you want, Garrett? OGO backpack?
Yeah, let's do the backpack.
Okay, this one's a backpack. And on this one, we're going to ask a question. All we're looking for is the year that this event occurred. When was the earliest documented wireless attack? And then we'll talk about how it happened. Okay, anything coming in?
Still no correct answer.
No correct answers.
I hear keyboards clicking furiously.
Do you have a correct answer from Jeff Gordon?
Jeff Gordon.
G-E-O-F-F.
Okay, not the NASCAR.
Not
All right.
NASCAR.
All right, Jeff, congratulations. Jeff knew that in 1903, the Marconi wireless telegraph was hacked. It's kind of a cool scenario here. So Marconi and his colleague, who was Professor, I've forgotten the guy's name. Anyway, they had set up a demonstration of the wireless telegraph. Now, Marconi was in Cornwall, England, and 300 miles away in London, his colleague was giving a dissertation on the telegraph, and at the end of his colleague's presentation, Marconi was going to send him a message in front of the audience, and everybody would be wowed and amazed that this Morse code message was going to come through. But unbeknownst to them, a kind of a competitor in the industry was nearby, and he had discovered the frequency that Marconi was going to be sending his message. And so this guy's name was Neville Maskelyne. Neville, using the same frequency but at a higher amperage, overwhelmed Marconi's message, and Maskelyne's message came through. And it was actually a limerick that was telling the audience that Marconi was taking them for a ride, basically. Maskelyne was essentially upset because he felt that the patent office, the government, had granted patents to Marconi that were too far-reaching and would stifle Maskelyne's effort to make headway in that industry. So anyway, congratulations to those that won those two. What we're going to do for the third prize is everyone who submits a question during today's webinar will be, put into a fishbowl. We'll draw it out, and the winner will be notified. One of our departments will get a hold of you and let you know that you won. I think it's like a 2020 Corvette that we're giving away, the new mid-engine. It might be a little lesser of a prize than that. So moving on.
Hot Wheels edition.
Yeah, the Hot Wheels. So we'd like to start the webinar today with kind of where we left off last year, and that was, we ended the webinar with some predictions of what we thought we might see in 2019. To set the stage for this, I'm going to give you the exact quote that I gave last year because it's still relevant. Maury Haber, CTO at Beyond Trust, once said, "There's 3 jobs in this world where you can be completely wrong all of the time and still not have to worry about being fired. One is being a parent, another is a weather person, and the last is a technology trends forecaster." So we've got that going for us. And remember, Bill Gates was right about computer security to an extent, that computers, he saw in the future that computers would remain vulnerable. Now, at the same time, in that same, later on in that same statement, he also said that no one would ever need more than 640K of RAM. So, all right. So even Gates wasn't right all the time. So the first, we talked about large-scale social media hacks leading to massive personal data losses. Facebook didn't let us down. 267 million Facebook users had their IDs, including phone numbers, exposed. But they didn't stop there. Earlier in the year, there were 540 million Facebook accounts exposed, but not to be outdone, the month prior to that, there was 600 million Facebook accounts that had exposure of personal data.
It's important to note too here, Dave, these aren't accumulative, these are individual breaches.
Yeah, you know, when I first saw these, and especially these last two, one occurred in March and the following in April, I thought the April one was actually a correction of the data they released in March, but no, it was separate. Let's see, Aaron, go ahead and take this.
Some of the things we saw were a number of social media sites being leaking data. A lot of that was personal in nature, things like usernames, passwords. However, I wanted to spend just a little moment and talk about some of the biometric data. These are things like fingerprints, eye scans, facial recognition. One organization lost a number of facial photos used for authentication purposes, fingerprints from 5,700 organizations from 83 different countries. Overall, they lost biometric data for more than 1 million people. Now, one of the interesting things is if you lose a username or a password, you can simply go and change that, right? However, you know, if you lose your employees' fingerprints, they get a little grumpy when you tell them they need to blowtorch their fingerprints off in order to protect the company data.
Well, and that becomes even a little more problematic if the biometric vector that they're using is facial recognition, because now you got to go and tell them, oh, you know, hey, you look great, but we need to change your face now.
There was that case a while back where that government agent had their identity compromised, and to remain undercover, they did have to go do that complete identity makeover. I think we've got a clip of that, don't we?
Yeah, I think so.
This is me.
Wow. Very impressive, 99. You were truly hideous back then.
Okay.
Some of us can actually probably benefit from a cosmetic makeover, but employees might not like that so much.
Okay, so moving into our next prediction from last year, a cloud provider would be seriously breached. And in the one I chose for that, there was actually a couple, but Capital One Bank suffered a massive breach that exposed account data for more than 100 million customers. And the way that this one came about was a former employee of Amazon Web Services was actually aware of the methodology that they would need to employ to be able to steal this account data without it triggering you know, safety protocols within the Capital One organization. So it was definitely you'd kind of have to consider it an insider attack, although the employee was no longer, or the suspect, Paige Thompson, was no longer an employee of Capital One. Let's see, and as a result, you know, Capital One made all of the notifications, and then they reached back and employed the S3 buckets. They enhanced them and employed them. And
one of the issues about that, Dave, though, is with all the focus on S3 buckets, that drew the attackers' attention as well. And if you remember, they had a issue with S3 buckets where some of the settings, the access settings, were defaulted to public. And we're still dealing with the blowback from that today, where any subdirectories within that bucket may have a public access setting still enabled. We've been seeing breaches, even some pretty large ones, where they came through that public access in those S3 buckets.
Yeah, I appreciate you adding that. Yeah, the one reason that we wanted to kind of highlight this is there are merchants and individuals out there that feel like if you put your data into the cloud, then you don't have to worry about it anymore. But you know, the security in the cloud is every bit as important that you stay on top of that as you do your, you know, security of the devices that you have physical control over. The next prediction we had was that foreign nation states would increase recruitment of corporate insiders to steal industry secrets. Now, when I contacted friends within the government that are, kind of in the know about this sort of thing, I received the proverbial, well, I can neither confirm nor deny answer, but basically they said, yeah, there's a lot of that going on. And the only time that they go public with it is when they make a high-level arrest or something like that.
We also have the prediction that passwords are going to continue having issues. We've seen this with the release of massive databases that contain billions of passwords. Even here at SecurityMetrics, our ability to test and crack passwords in the last year has skyrocketed. We've got our own databases that have billions of passwords. We also continue to see these being released out to the public. There's that, was it a Scandinavian company that?
Yeah, it was an individual in, I believe it was Sweden. He was kind of the first, the early pioneer of this. He has a system online, and it's been a while since I've checked. His system may have even improved since then, but the last I saw is that he could crack any password up to 20 characters within a matter of a day or two. And so when I say any password, we're talking any possible combination of keyboard keystrokes.
Up to like 20 characters?
Up to a full 20 characters. It's, possible combinations. Now, what takes days today in the computer world turns into hours tomorrow, which turns into minutes, which turns into seconds and milliseconds and nanoseconds. So, when you have caches of known passwords out there, you can go on the internet and do a search right now. I came up with some very, very quickly where they go, okay, this 1.5 billion passwords is in a text file that we'll send to you for free. And it might sound like, okay, it's going to take a while to search through 1.5 billion passwords, but the truth is it's in a text file. It takes a second, less than a second, kind of thing.
And hackers are taking full advantage of this as well. We've seen an increase in the number of people getting those emails that say, hey, we've got your password, we caught you doing stuff you shouldn't be doing, please send us this amount of money. And they actually send you a lot of times a legitimate password. And the goal is to scare people into thinking they actually found something, when in reality they just went out to one of these massive password databases and associated your email with any password you may have used in the past. Hopefully, most of the time, those are passwords that you're no longer using if you're following a good password recycling program.
Yeah. Okay, so what did we see in 2019? On a high level, we just threw out a few things that were commonalities. One was understanding how computer breaches happened for years and years and years. It was the attacker going after the low-hanging fruit. And so imagine a guy sitting in front of his computer at night, and he enters in a range of IP addresses and starts an IP scan. He goes to bed, wakes up in the morning, and he's looking at his results, and he's looking for some things in particular. He's looking for certain ports like 5631, 5632, and he goes, oh, those are associated with remote access. And so now against those, he's going to try to enter some default usernames, passwords, things like that, and try to break the remote access to get in. And it's not until he's actually inside the system does he realize where he is. Now, he might have just, broken into my, grandmother's computer at home, and he has a wonderful array of, grandchildren and cat photos. Or he might, discover, oh, I'm inside of a commercial industry, a business, and now he refocuses on trying to acquire credit card data, hospital information, something along those lines. What we've seen though in the last year plus is that it isn't random anymore. The attackers, most of the low-hanging fruit for them has been picked. EMV, the implementation of EMV has kind of made that a little bit harder for them. And so now they are looking at targeting specific businesses where they identify a third-party service provider who provides a payment application or something, where if you can get into there, that is a jumping off point for potentially hundreds of other businesses.
Yeah, we've seen quite a bit of that, and maybe a different analogy rather than low-hanging fruit. The attackers may have just moved to a different orchard.
Yeah.
We've seen this with EMV, where EMV has been properly implemented, especially with technologies like P2PE that really protect that cardholder data pretty well and keep hackers from stealing it, at the card present locations. With the implementation of EMV, it's moving the attackers over to seek lower hanging fruit in other areas such as e-commerce.
Yeah, and right before I get that, I want to give you one example though of a targeted attack. And we had numerous of them, but for example, there was a financial institution. It was an investment company, a VC company, that an attacker got in, hacked the company email server, and he was able to monitor communications from the CEO to the bank, and was able to, after watching what these communications between the CEO and the bank looked like, he engineered an email from him, but spoofed it as if it were coming from the CEO to the bank to transfer a large sum of money. I think it was about $3.5 million to a bank in Mexico. Well, to the receiving bank that was transferring the funds, it looked exactly like the normal protocol that the CEO followed. The one problem is they didn't have a mechanism to independently validate every requested financial transfer. And so the bank here in the United States transferred the money out of the country, and this was all done without the CEO ever seeing any of these emails. And you'll also see this type of an attack with title companies, where people are transferring funds for the down payment of a house, and at the last minute the title company receives an email supposedly from the buyer that says, oh, these funds are from the seller, saying, oh, instead of sending the funds to the account I gave you before, send it to this one. And if that financial institution doesn't pick up the phone, make a phone call, get somebody that they, on a phone number that they know and trust, then you've got the issue of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars going to the wrong party.
Yeah, when these attackers get in and specifically target these companies, they may be in for quite a long time. They don't necessarily tip their hand and look for the lowest hanging fruit, so to speak. They're going after the big payouts, where they can really take advantage of things like social engineering to really make off with a lot of valuable data or cash itself.
Yeah.
So as EMV technology has been implemented, that replaces the mag stripe with a computer chip that creates the one-time use transaction code. Any data that an attacker might grab in breach of an EMV-enabled device would be pretty limited at that point, and insufficient to be able to reproduce a usable credit card that they can then go sell on the dark web. As a result of that, we expected to see, and we did see, a large reduction in point-of-sale breaches at individual merchants. With EMV making a hacker's life more difficult to capture usable credit card data from a card-present merchant, we knew that the attackers are going to work to become better at attacking e-commerce sites, and they have certainly done that. Attackers discovered if they could alter a payment page, say, not really to divert data, because when the data stops flowing as usual, people are going to notice. If a merchant doesn't receive a payment for an order, they're going to know something's up. And they'll make sure that problem gets investigated, and that attacker's breach into that system has a very limited lifespan. But rather, attackers will copy the data. They might hold on to it, or they might put their code in a place that's very difficult to spot, where they can just skim a little bit of data. And the reason it's difficult to spot is typically that e-commerce sites use file integrity monitoring tools to alert if any critical files have been altered. The problem with that, however, is the payment page or the database is a highly volatile, very dynamic environment. Scripts are being pulled in from various third parties, and a lot of things are constantly changing in a dynamic shopping cart checkout process, especially when analytics and advertising and marketing campaigns are all involved, and all that data is trying to be put in place and mined for all the relevant information that applies. File integrity monitoring just can't operate in that type of environment where so much is changing all the time. So in the last year, we've seen 80% of the e-commerce breaches that we've investigated have been associated with changes to these payment pages where file integrity monitoring just hasn't been able to yield any valuable protection. Now, if I remember right, last year in this webinar, Dave, you gave the audience a tease about a tool that we were working on that monitored unauthorized changes to these dynamic pages in a way that ASV scans and other tools were not doing.
Right, yeah, and that tool's been developed. We were actually granted a patent during 2019 on that tool, but I'll toss that back over to you.
Yeah, we'll take some more time later on and talk more about that, but basically it's a tool that monitors for these malicious scripts as the card number and the user's address information. All that cardholder data is being put right into the payment form right at the moment of checkout. Okay,
so ransomware. Now, last year I reported that ransomware was on the decline. 2018 showed about 35% fewer ransomware attacks than the previous year, 2017. And so the trend was thought to be heading south. But what happened?
Well, as I mentioned, as merchants did better with implementing solutions like P2PE, the attackers would go to all the work of getting into the system to try to get that data, and would find out the credit cards that they were after were no longer there. However, the attackers aren't just going to walk away. They're going to try to monetize their efforts in any way they can. And a lot of ways they're doing that is they're returning to the ransomware stuff that they were doing in earliest years. In the last year, ransomware attacks tripled to around $36,000 in losses per attack. That comes from KnowBe4.
Yeah, and the thing to be aware on that one, when you hear a figure of like an average amount of money that is lost or paid, the average ransom, like in this case, 36,000. This is my own personal opinion. I think it might be related to their experience in the cases that they looked at. I've seen others. There was a forensic provider on the East Coast, and their experience was that the average ransom being paid was much larger than that. But I think that's relative to they were investigating cases that were where the victim was on a much larger scale, had deeper pockets, something like that. There's actually a particular ransom called REvil, a ransomware called REvil, and the average ransom demand when that particular ransomware was deployed was $260,000.
Yeah, and I mean that if that hits a large organization, that can easily go up into the millions of dollars. The interesting thing to know, it's being reported right now that successful ransomware attacks are actually happening every 11 seconds. I mean, that's just phenomenal.
Yeah, that's globally, not just in the US.
Yeah, not just in the US, but globally. Ransomware is estimated to have global damage costing organizations $11.5 billion in 2019 alone.
That's US.
Yes, that's in the U.S.
Yeah.
Globally, that is projected to grow into the trillions of dollars.
Yeah, by the end of 2021, which is just mind-boggling. You know,
Yeah,
you think that's more than countries are worth.
Yeah, that's more than the GDP of many nations.
Yeah.
A new tactic that attackers are doing is not just encrypting the data. Now they're actually going in and pulling confidential information, customer databases, any HIPAA data that they can find, and they're holding that for ransom as well. So, if you try to use the excuse, oh no, we've got backups, we're just going to ignore these guys and restore from backup. They hit you up again and say, well, we've got all your HIPAA data. We're going to release it publicly if you don't pay us X amount of money.
Yeah, and they'll typically show you a snippet of your database or something.
Yeah,
like
they'll prove that they've got your data. The danger in that is you have no guarantee that they're not going to release it anyway, or that they're not going to hold on to it and just every year hit you up for your extortion fee.
Yeah. Now, one of the positives, I guess you could say in ransomware, the sophistication level of the attackers has increased, and at the same time, their professionalism, I guess you could call it, has increased a little bit as well.
Can you call it that?
Yeah. Again, it was that East Coast forensic company that reported that in 97% of the cases where they had clients opt to pay the ransom, the key that they received actually was functioning. It worked. It decrypted the majority of the encrypted files, which that's a big increase over past years. Last year, I think it was somewhere around the 2/3 of the time.
And one of the breaches that I investigated just a few weeks ago over the Christmas holiday, the ransom note that the attackers left on each of the machines was actually very cordial. They wished them a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and they put right in their ransom note, look, this is just a business for us.
It's not personal.
Nothing personal. We've got your data. If you pay us, we have every interest in restoring your data to you. And in that case, they did elect to get the decryption keys, and they were able to very quickly restore their data.
One change I think that we're seeing is it's reaching down a little deeper now. And when ransomware was first began to become the vogue, it was bigger businesses, deeper pockets, municipalities that were being hit. By the way, 22 cities in Texas all got nailed with ransomware within a few weeks of each other. None of those cities actually paid the ransom. But that said, what we're starting to see though is it reaching down to much smaller businesses and oftentimes even individuals. I've got a good friend of mine that told me he comes to work one day and he finds that his work computer, and now he runs a very small business. There's like 2 or 3 people in the office, one business computer, and his business computer had been locked up with ransomware. He reaches out to the he tries to get his files back, figures out that he can't on his own, so he reaches out to the attacker, and the attacker, when he realizes that he was dealing with really small potatoes, just said, hey, give me $200 in Bitcoin, and and we'll restore it. So my friend takes him an hour or two to set up a Bitcoin account or whatever, a Coinbase account, and to be able to transfer the Bitcoin to him. He transfers the $200 to the attacker, doesn't hear from him. So he reaches back out to the attacker and he gets an email back where the attacker replies, and I'm quoting, hey dude, I'm just a scammer. I don't even have the key. So it turns out that this guy that he was communicating with, as near as I could tell, he had launched sort of a man-in-the-middle attack, but who lost out on this man-in-the-middle attack wasn't your conventional one. It was actually, he was scamming the scammer.
Yeah, he was stealing money that should have gone to the legitimate scammer.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to warn you about the next slide. There is an abundance of information on it. I know you're all going to get a copy of these slides later on. We wanted you to have this data, but we're we're covering off on things that you can do before you're breached by a ransomware attack, and then if you are actually locked out, some do's and don'ts.
It's a pretty busy slide, but it's got a lot of valuable information. Some of it's common sense. Some of it might not be things you've considered. Number one is make sure you've got a good antivirus software and firewall in place. A lot of times the ransomware, if you catch it quickly, you can prevent a disaster from happening, catastrophic loss of your data. One of the breaches I recently looked at, they were relying on just the default antivirus that came with the operating system. And the issue with that is the ransomware will go in, and one of the first things it does, within microseconds of being triggered, is it goes through and shuts down all processes that it thinks might have the ability to shut it down. And so they go in and they issue kill orders to all of those processes that have the ability to shut that ransomware attack down. So if you use a good antivirus, so a lot of them are successful at stopping the attack before it gets underway. Also, you need to employ content scanning and filtering on your mail servers. A lot of these ransomware malware files are coming in through email vectors, and all those attachments need to be blocked and scanned. Number three, make sure that all systems and software are up to date with relevant patches. Exploit kits hosted on the compromised websites are commonly used to spread malware. You've got to get those patches put in place. I know there's some requirements in the PCI program. My personal opinion is those are not nearly quick enough. As soon as exploits are announced, the attackers immediately start scanning their portfolios of known websites that may be vulnerable to those type of attacks. We often see attackers hitting those exploits or those vulnerabilities within minutes to hours of the exploits being announced. So if you think you can get around to it in 30 days, you might regret waiting that long. We recommend all of our clients to get those things patched within about 24 hours if possible. Block inbound network traffic from things like Tor. And when you're traveling, this is important. Make sure you've got a VPN set up, especially when using public Wi-Fi or your hotel Wi-Fi. Another important one, we'll talk about this one a bit later, is bring your own device vulnerabilities. This is where employees might bring in laptops or cell phones. We've seen ransomware attacks that came in through cell phones that have been compromised. Also, don't trust your third-party service provider security. Recent announcement from a very large service provider where they got in through the service provider's access credentials. So you've got to vet those third parties continuously. Most importantly, do not leave your backup devices connected. We see people doing their best to back up their mission critical data, but the attackers will go in, and if you've got a time capsule or a file server that's acting as backup, those get encrypted just as quickly as anything else.
Okay, so moving to, all right, you've done all of those things, and despite your best efforts, you come to work and your systems are locked down. We recommend, and the United States government recommends, that you don't pay the ransom. Now, this is going to be a business decision that you have to make. A couple of things that you can do is look at the type of ransomware that has been employed on your system, and then try to research to see if there's a history of these attackers providing usable decryption keys and factor that into the decision. But the overall recommendation is not to pay the ransom, because it just encourages further ransoming, further illicit activities like this. Aaron mentioned the backup files. The best way trusted backups that you know that you can restore from. You do that, but then you do hazard now. The element that Aaron brought up that we're starting to see is if the attacker then comes back to you and says, yeah, I captured your database, your patient list, or whatever it might be. So again, those are all going to be business decisions, but it's essential that you maintain backups and that you practice restoring from them, because some businesses find that they've got oh, hey, we're in good shape, we've got all these tape backups, and then they realize how difficult it is to actually restore a system from the tape archived backups. When you're communicating with the attacker, we recommend that you create a new email persona and do all of your communications through a new email, not one of your previously known or used ones. You just don't want to give them more information than they already have. And then lastly, call for help. Get a hold of professionals who have experience working with ransomware, working with the investigation side of it, the restoration side of it, things along those lines. We've covered a lot of information. We're going to speed things up a little bit as we get through the remainder. The next area was phishing. Has there been a change? Yeah, it's just plain gotten worse. Phishing attacks are the gateway drug for ransomware and for so many other attacks. So it's really going to warrant training your employees. We'll touch on a little bit later.
Service provider attacks. These have doubled in 2018. 2019 held a similar pace. Attacks against service providers are especially egregious due to the potential impact on a number of other businesses. 2 or 3 service provider investigations immediately come to mind that we experienced last year. In one case, the service provider provided point of sale systems to a number of different merchants, and they also provided a back-end website that would allow the service provider to come in and support and upgrade and patch the payment system as it was needed. The issue they had was attackers were able to get into that back-end support website and compromise anybody that was running that vendor's point of sale solution. Another issue is that a lot of times there is code being included in the back end of websites by entities that can have a significant impact on the security of the card data environment. These might include things like advertisers or analytic providers.
So you'd call these guys the service providers that don't want to be called service providers?
Yes, in fact, many of them specifically state that they are not service providers, that you're running their code at your own risk. However, if that code is being deployed when credit cards are present on a checkout process, like in a shopping cart, if that code is corrupted or malware is introduced, that has a tremendous impact on the card data environment. And so if it's a service provider that's doing it, the same code you might have on your website is very likely deployed across, hundreds or thousands of other merchants. So a little small breach at a service provider can turn into a large breach throughout a service provider's portfolio.
Yeah. And in one case, or actually a couple of cases that we've looked at, the data loss looked very sporadic. It was really interesting. You'd see a day where they're just getting pounded and losing data all over the place, and then a week would go by of nothing, and then they get pounded again. And we found that it was these scrolling ads that were occurring where one particular ad was infected.
Well, it's kind of like what we mentioned before, where if an attacker gets into a system, they might grab everything and run, but these guys are smart. They know if they can just steal a few cards from a merchant and not grab everything, it may be years before that breach is detected or reported. your acquirer may come back to you and say, hey, we noticed you're leaking a few cards. You might look and see that it's only 2 or 3 cards a week, but over a large time period, that can lead to significant losses.
Yep. So just the top organizational values, you can see them on your screen there. Employees, number 1, and numbers 3 through 6 are a distant, second behind it. Employees, the need to train employees on how to spot a phishing attack, a spear phishing email, an effort to social network incursions into your environment. Those are critical. Now, the breach trends that we saw, we're just going to go through this very quickly. Aaron, go ahead and start us off here.
Firewalls, we continue to see the same type of issues. The worst thing, of course, is when there's no firewalls in place, and we did see some of these in recent cases. Improper configurations. And another big issue is when a firewall is there, but between a service provider and the merchant, nobody is sure who is supposed to be in charge of that firewall.
Yeah, and I just got back from an on-site where I visited numerous franchise-owned locations, and while the corporation, had set out some guidelines, each of these franchise owners set up their environment, very distinctly. They all ran the same software, but their environments were different, and in a couple of the cases, there was no firewall present at all.
Passwords continue to be an issue. We've talked about that. Using default password, we still see it happening. Non-complex passwords, passwords that exist in public databases now. All those things kind of are still issues we see. Antivirus, this is another instance where there may be some confusion between the merchant and the service provider of who is in charge of making sure antivirus is installed. Making sure it's updated, and most importantly, looking at the alerts, knowing where those alerts are going and who's responsible for acting on those alerts. Also, secure access, lack of multi-factor authentication, we still see that. Weak passwords being used, shared logins, all those things continue to be an issue. With multi-factor authentication, we also wanted to address multi-channel authentication. This is making sure that if you're requesting a security token, that it's not coming back to the same machine that you're going to use to access the sensitive network. Make sure that those authentication tokens are going to your mobile cell phone or an authentication device somewhere else. Otherwise, the attackers will see that authentication token and they'll probably be in ahead of you.
So in healthcare, what are we seeing there? Well, we're still seeing that the healthcare industry is square in the sights of attackers. They remain at high risk for principally 3 reasons. First, they contain a treasure trove of valuable information, confidential data that can be quickly capitalized on the black market. Second, they still lag behind when it comes to employing industry standard security protocols. And granted, I understand that the environment of security is constantly evolving, the attack vectors are constantly evolving, so security protocols have to constantly evolve as well. The sad truth, though, is that many healthcare organizations that we've investigated are like a decade or more behind where they should be as far as employing better IT security. And thirdly, they're more prone to pay the ransom. They need to get that data back. They need to get it quickly. I mean, virtually lives hang in the balance.
And they're also most vulnerable to having their HIPAA data exposed. I mean, that's a pretty powerful extortion request if you know individual PII data is out there.
Right. Just some of the headlines from last year regarding, healthcare data breaches are going to cost $4 billion for healthcare breaches in 2020. Organizations lagging behind the NIST. The NIST are security guidelines that have been set up that, virtually all organizations should be in compliance with. lab instruments leaking patient data, hacking IT incidents are causing bigger breaches. So anyway, just the point here is that it is still it's still happening in the healthcare industry, still getting hit very, very hard. Now that brings us into things that we can do to avoid data breaches. And the truth is Aaron and I have already covered a lot of these things. So we're going to go through them fairly quickly. I think there's about 9 of them. Starting with, I've mentioned it, we've got to do a better job of training our staff in being able to, identify security issues. They need awareness training in identifying phishing emails, social engineering attacks. We need to also give training to our incident response teams, those who we're going to call on to get us out of the grease when a problem has come up. Incident response training applies to the assigned incident response team, whereas the other security awareness really needs to go to everybody from the mailroom to the C-suite. Phishing, spear phishing, we mentioned that, and we covered off on the need to train for social engineering.
Also updating patches. We spoke about this one. Just make sure you're getting those patches applied. Very, very critical if you're using things like Magento or OpenCommerce, any of those off-the-shelf patches. That's all open source code, and attackers are watching that very, very closely. Those type of sites are always under attack, and so those patches have to be applied right away. Yeah,
and we've seen numerous cases where a vulnerability comes up, a patch gets issued, and 6 months, 9 months, a year later, a company gets breached because they never employed the patch. Yes. That it had been out there forever.
Or the patch may be applied, but the attacker got in before it was applied, and right. So they got a foothold and they're still there.
Yeah.
Vulnerability scans and pen tests. Get those scans scheduled. They can find a lot of the glaring issues. Pen test regularly. There are 19 new vulnerabilities reported every single day in the National Vulnerability Database. All pen tests are not the same. I have very little confidence in automated off-the-shelf pen tests. I've seen too many times where automated pen tests fail to disclose a vulnerability that a skilled pen tester would have found in minutes. Log monitoring. This is another one where if you've got a service provider, make sure you know who is monitoring, who's in charge of monitoring those logs, making sure those logs are being kept and reviewed, and who is acting on alerts in those logs.
On passwords, we've mentioned it a couple of times. The industry standard is a minimum of 8 characters, case sensitive, so upper, lowercase, numeric, and special characters. Personally, I wouldn't use any passwords that are under 12 characters, and ideally they should be changed every 6 months. Here is a site, haveibeenpwned.com, where you can type in a password. It doesn't ask for your username, it doesn't ask for your email address or anything like that. You just type in a password and it says, hey, this password was captured in a previous breach, or no, we haven't seen this one in a previous breach. Now, qualifying this, we believe that this site is legitimate and safe. There are sites out there, however, that are going to say, no, it hasn't been captured before, but they have now, because you entered it in there and they just add it to their database. Yep,
they're going to grab that password and they're going to be off to check social media and anything else they can where that might work.
Yeah.
Access. Again, this is using the multi-factor authentication principles. Something like username, password, something you have, like a code on your phone, and biometrics that we've talked about. Role-based access. We just had a case where the SQL admin user had execution privileges. They were able to take that execution privilege and elevate that into access on the web server. When we looked at it, there was absolutely no need for the SQL admin user to have the level of privileges that it needed. They were able to restrict it to simple read-write privileges, and that solved the issue. Network segmentation, we've talked about this one over and over. Just make sure that that is happening so you get functionality separated so there's less surface area for the attackers to hit. A lot of merchants are choosing to move their checkout process to a third party. That can get your website moved out of scope if you do it properly. Switching to EMV terminals to hide that sensitive data or moving to P2PE solutions is one of our #1 recommendations. We have not seen a P2P solution fail yet. Make sure you're encrypting the data. This comes into play for things like hospitals where if an attacker gets in, if that data is encrypted, they're not going to be able to hold that data hostage. Make sure those time machines are backed up, your cloud backups, make sure those are encrypted, external hard drives. Very, very important to test those backups, make sure they work, and make sure they're encrypted.
Okay, number 9 is having an incident response plan. It's important for you to have a plan, have everybody trained in what their roles are if something bad happens, and then conduct tabletop exercises to test your plan. And then the greatest benefit that can come out of a tabletop exercise is that you identify gaps in your plan, you then modify the plan, and then you employ those in your future testing. Which brings us up very quickly to our predictions for this coming year. We just have 3. Aaron, why don't you take the first 2?
We're seeing organizations move a lot of their products and services to cloud-based solutions. We're going to see attacks that are specifically adapting and targeting these cloud-based services, including message platforms, things like the live chat apps that are going on. Storage solutions are going to be hit more, and especially JavaScript code that's being delivered from cloud-based content delivery networks. The attackers are going after that. A little bit of effort there can yield a lot of payoff for the attackers. We're also going to see a spike in the registration of lookalike domains that are being used for nefarious purposes. Merchants should register domain names that are similar to their own to prevent bad actors from doing the same and targeting their customers with fake domain attacks.
And then I threw the 3rd one on because I'm still holding out. I've had this one on here before. That's, spy versus spy. You might recognize the cartoon. And although this looks like Al versus Al, it's actually AI versus AI. And this is where attackers are going to try to get their malware embedded into the AI while it is still in its learning phase, so that as it learns about the environment that it's in, it is going to recognize the malware as part of an allowable element within that environment, and then overlook it in the future.
And to help combat that, SecurityMetrics has a tool that we are putting out that uses a lot of really cool intelligence techniques to monitor those checkout pages at the exact moment of checkout when that credit card data is being typed in. We're monitoring that security state. All of these scanning tools and things that are out there right now, if they're looking at the security state that is presented as a person enters that environment, by the time you go through a checkout process and put a product in the shopping cart and get to that checkout page, you might be in a completely different security state. And so the tools that we're putting out there right now simulate that process and actually look at what is going on at the moment of checkout.
Great, thanks. The tool's called WIM, if anybody wants to know. Website integrity monitoring.
Yeah, if you want to know more about it, get a hold of us.
Okay, and then that brings us to questions. Sorry, we had originally said 10 minutes of Q&A. I think we've got about 1.
Yeah, we have time for a couple, I think. One question that came in, is there any data about how much efforts are being made by law enforcement agencies to catch such hackers and recover the money, or is this money simply getting lost in thin air?
Great question. I'm also, former law enforcement. I've seen a variety of statistics, but traditionally about 5 to 15%, it depends on who you look at, of these cases actually results in an arrest. The funds are very rarely recovered. I did work a case earlier this year where it was a redirect. It was one of those situations where a VC company provided some funds, sent it to the wrong location, and they were actually able to recover the money. Those are a little bit more rare. Law enforcement is getting better at performing these types of investigations. Most of them, or a lot of the agencies, unless they are a larger municipality, actually request the assistance of federal law enforcement who are better equipped at performing these long-term investigations.
Thanks, Dave. And one other question, this may be good for Aaron. Is it fair to say that EMV has slowed the low-hanging fruit when considering that many of the e-commerce breaches result in card not present fraud trends?
It has absolutely lowered the amount of data breaches we are seeing at card present locations. Again, it's sort of rendering that card number a bit useless because the one-time authorization code that is present for the EMV makes it very difficult to physically replicate that card so somebody can go and use it as they would any other card. However, that card is still vulnerable. If that card is captured, the person that has that card number can now take it to a card not present environment and use it at a variety of locations to purchase other products and things like that.
Yeah, so it validates the need to have all of the other security protocols in place as well.
Yeah, you still have to have it, but the attackers are moving to different orchards, specifically the e-commerce environment, where they can still capture enough data to make that card number very useful.
Great. And then maybe let's wrap up with one more question here. And again, if we don't get to your question today, we will reach out to you via email. But since we had the Get Smart clip earlier with the biometrics, I thought it might be fitting to end with this question. What are your views and opinions on China's facial recognition systems used to track and monitor their citizens? Do you feel that this will become a greater security risk as it gains popularity?
A greater security risk? Well, first off, as a former law enforcement officer, I mean, I love anything that will bring bad guys to justice. So, the thought that we can say, okay, here's the face of this guy that committed this crime, and then we can start scanning all of our cameras that are on street corners and find them. I mean, the law enforcement side of me says, yeah, that's awesome. The personal privacy side of me says, oh, that is really scary.
Yeah, that's really scary because anybody can be a bad guy if you look hard enough.
Yeah. And so this isn't necessarily the question he asked. I'm not a fan. I think it's overreaching the way that I believe China is employing it. Would it reduce crime? Yeah. Okay.
People would be too scared to commit any crime.
Yeah. Or you see everybody walking down the street with hoodies, on and pulled down over.
Well, that gets into questions too of expectations of privacy. You can pretty much guarantee anymore if you walk outside, you're going to have a camera on you somewhere. Yeah. I just fell in the parking lot the other day, and they caught a good portion of me windmilling across the parking lot on ice.
Yeah.
Thankfully, it didn't get uploaded to YouTube
Yet. Anyway, we're about 4 minutes into extra innings right now. So.
Well, yeah. Thanks everyone for joining us today, and thanks again to Dave and Aaron for taking the time to speak with us. We hope you enjoyed this webinar, and again, we will be sending out the recording, so stay tuned for that. And we hope to see you again at another webinar with us very soon.
And the 3 winners.
Oh, right, and we will be drawing. We will be having a drawing for those of you that did submit questions. We will pick a winner. We're not going to announce the winner at this time, but we will be drawing a winner from those of you that submitted questions. So we'll be reaching out to you for that, and our 2 trivia winners from earlier, we will be getting you your swag, a windbreaker, and a backpack.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.